Combat worst case scenario. An argument for strength training in the military. All the mystery of combat is in the legs, and it is to the legs that we should apply ourselves. I remember reading this quote by Marshal Maurice de Saxe in the book The Soldier's Load and the Mobility of a Nation when I was a young lieutenant in the Army. SLA Marshal, P8. For many years, I misinterpreted the quote to be an affirmation that the physical training PT programming which I saw throughout the Army, based around long, slow distance running, was right on track. It was during my 4th combat deployment that I finally got serious about physical fitness as part of my duties as a soldier. After years of the same old RBPT, I had recently been introduced to CrossFit. Interest in this method of training led me to do lots of reading about fitness, and I soon discovered there was more to fitness than the Army physical fitness test. APFT. My reading eventually led me to the Starting Strength website as well as the books of strength coach Mark Rippetoe. As a field artillery officer in the Army, one can never escape the occasional trip to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Having spent the first 5 years of my career there, I was well aware that Wichita Falls, Texas, was just a short drive down a very lifeless highway. Prior to one trip, I decided to contact Mr. Rippetoe and ask if I could come down and check out the Wichita Falls Athletic Club facilities. Within just a few minutes, he called me, not only to invite me down to WAFAC, but also to discuss the military's physical training challenges. Upon my arrival at WAFAC, Mark Rippetoe and I went immediately into a discussion about why a strength-focused program works best for soldiers. As the conversation went on, Rip asked me a question which at first I thought rather odd. "What is the worst case scenario for you in combat?" he asked. Rather than speculate, I figured I would simply recount the worst situation I had personally faced in combat. Getting blown up takes strength. On March 23, 2009, in the northern Iraqi city of Mosul, 5 soldiers and 2 interpreters from my military transition team were finishing up a dismounted patrol in the neighborhood known as Baghdad Garage. We had conducted a short patrol with our Iraqi National Police counterparts through the confusing back alleys of the neighborhood, in preparation for an upcoming clearing operation in the area. As we arrived back at our vehicles, I suddenly felt a tremendous blast. The sky seemed to instantly turn a hazy orange color, and I was knocked to the ground. As I got to my feet and tried to figure out what the hell was going on, I saw that my Iraqi interpreter was on the ground next to the truck. I grabbed him by the body armor and lifted him to his feet. We then sprinted around the truck to link up with another team member. After linking up, we sprinted out to the blast location where 2 badly wounded Iraqi national policemen were being treated and prepared for evacuation. I arrived in time to assist in lifting the 2 casualties into a pickup truck for movement to a local hospital. The whole ordeal took less than a minute. Much to our surprise, there was no follow-on attack. It took much longer for my brain to process what had happened than it did for my body to act. We soon figured out that it had been a suicide bomber wearing what was later determined to be a vest packet with 25 pounds of explosives, who had detonated himself less than 10 meters away from me. As I recounted the story to Rip, he did an on-the-spot needs analysis of my combat scenario. The following is a combination of the tasks he identified and my analysis commentary. Task 1. Absorb a blast. With my equipment on, I estimate I weighed about 245 pounds that day. At 5'11", my body weight was about 185. I had been doing more conditioning than strength training and had never really done a strength program with the intent of gaining mass. While I was knocked to the ground and suffered a slight ankle sprain in doing so, it is fair to argue that a more massive, stronger body would have absorbed that blast better than a smaller, weaker one. Strength training can put on that necessary mass, as well as enhance the stability of connective tissue and thus improve the ability of a body to absorb blast energy. My much lighter Iraqi interpreter, probably 180 with equipment, did not take the blast as well. He was certainly in no hurry to get up off the ground. Task 2. Lunge. While slightly disoriented and burdened with 60 pounds of equipment, this movement would be categorized as some combination of a get up and lunge in order to get off of the ground and back on my feet where I needed to be. The get up portion required some trunk stability. The typical army sit up does not get you where you need to be. Deadlifts, squats, and presses are a much more effective method of building the requisite strength in a soldier's trunk. The lunge portion of the movement was an expression of hip, glute, and quad and hamstring strength. Squats are almost universally acknowledged as the best method of building strength in these areas. Task 3. Deadlift. Although my interpreter was not dead, he was certainly dead weight. After getting to my feet, I reached down, grabbed his body armor with both hands, and pulled him to his feet. Though my mechanics may not have been textbook at the time, this movement was somewhere in the deadlift family, clearly a strength task, and one that few soldiers perform on a regular basis. Regular deadlifting within a soldier's PT program will not only allow the soldier to pick up heavy things when necessary, but will strengthen the overall musculature of the back, making the soldier better suited to wear heavy body armor or rucksack for hours at a time. Task 4 and 5. 10-meter sprint. I only knew which direction the blast came from, so I sprinted to the opposite side of the truck to avoid any more blasts, as well as to link up with my teammate. This short burst of activity is more closely associated with strength training than any of the low-intensity jogging I had done for many years, especially in heavy body armor. This task also ties into the previous one. As noted in Practical Programming for Strength Training, and later to me in my continuing conversation with Rip, deadlifting will improve sprint times in a weak novice more rapidly than improved sprint mechanics will. Task 6. The power clean. We lifted the Iraqi casualties into the back of a full-size Ford pickup truck. This movement best correlates with a power clean. Lifting a person up high off the ground is not an easy thing to do. Though their body weight had been drastically reduced by the unfortunate loss of both legs in the attack, it still took a good pull and some hip extension in order to get the wounded policeman into the back of the truck. Prior to my conversation with Rip, I had read Major Ryan Long's excellent article, Why Does the Army Want Me Weak?, which discussed some of the physical requirements of combat. I also heard the president of the National Strength and Conditioning Association, NSCA, Dr. Jay Hoffman, state during the Tactical Strength and Conditioning course that strength training was far more beneficial than endurance training in preparing a soldier for combat in Afghanistan. While I was well on my way to becoming a firm believer in the barbell, I was not yet fully divorced from the endurance-happy culture of Army physical training. However, as Rip and I discussed my combat worst-case scenario and the associated strength tasks, it finally occurred to me that I now had a better way to convince soldiers that combat is predominantly a strength sport, not an endurance sport. This methodology, of course, cannot account for catastrophic events such as a large vehicle-borne improvised explosive devices or the sudden impact of a sniper's bullet. Those and other events can kill a soldier immediately and offer no opportunity for the soldier to affect the outcome. I'm talking about situations where the soldier is forced to do something. In almost all cases, that something involves strength. Upon my return to Fort Carson, I polled some soldiers with a slightly more direct question. What is the worst thing that ever happened to you in combat? Although I heard stories ranging from vehicle rollovers to hand combat, the outcomes of the needs analysis were consistent. At the moment of truth, soldiers face almost exclusively strength tasks. Can we conduct effective strength training in the military? Further into the conversation with Rip, we discussed strength standards for soldiers. He threw around some numbers, and I countered with my estimate of how woefully unprepared most soldiers currently are to meet those standards. The endurance culture of the Army has made it difficult to find soldiers who can squat their own body weight for 5 reps, deadlift 1.5 times their body weight for 5 reps, or press 2/3 of their body weight for 5 reps. I began to ask myself if it is possible to get large numbers of soldiers to achieve this level of strength. When it comes to strength and conditioning, we here in the 10th Special Forces Group Airborne have a leg up on the vast majority of the Army. We have 2 contracted strength coaches and will soon hire a director of human performance, or head strength coach. Additionally, myself and the group physical therapists are both CSCS and USAW certified. If we get serious about strength training, we can create a culture where strength is favored over endurance, and we can do it relatively quickly. Starting strength. If we took every new arrival to the group and put him or her on the novice program from starting strength, within 3 years we would greatly improve the overall physical fitness level and combat readiness of the entire group. With 5 strength coaches to supervise the program and 4 well-equipped power rack platforms in our gym, here is how I propose to run the program. Soldiers will be sorted into 2 groups based on military occupational specialty age, level of training advancement, body composition, and an assessment by the strength staff. There will be an A group who will conduct a 3 times weekly program and a B group who will conduct a 2 times weekly program. The strength program would not strictly follow what is laid out in starting strength. It will not be a true linear progression with multiple resets until a soldier reaches a point where he needs a more complex program to continue strength adaptation. Tudor Bompa talks about a general strength training phase in which all muscle groups, ligaments, and tendons are developed in anticipation of future heavy loads and specific training. He notes that this phase could take 2 to 4 years. Periodization training for sports, page 58. But soldiers don't get red shirt years like college athletes, so it's impossible to spend that kind of time preparing them for the demands of combat. A properly executed 12-week program of strength training consists of squats, deadlifts, press, bench press, and chin-ups, has been demonstrated to establish a base of strength and familiarization with strength training that is sufficient for the needs of most soldiers. There are several reasons why I'd use a program similar to the starting strength novice program. First of all, it's super simple and it's linear. Most soldiers who have done their own random programming for several years really have no idea how strong they are or are not. They have never followed a linear progression with consistent increases in weight to cause the necessary adaptation to get stronger. Once they do, they will accomplish several things simultaneously. They will get stronger, there is no doubt. While my experience is limited, I have yet to see anyone fail to get stronger using the novice program from starting strength. Secondly, their progress will build confidence in the strength staff. This is an important aspect, especially in the special operations community, where trust is earned only through outstanding performance. Soldiers will see that the strength coaches really do know what they are talking about when it comes to building strength, so it's reasonable to expect good results in following future programming as it applies to conditioning, body composition improvement, or specific preparation for upcoming missions. Lastly, the program simplicity allows the time for emphasis on proper technique throughout. The focus on technique will carry over to any future programming and reduce the number of physical training injuries in the long run. In our new human optimization facility, formerly known as the gym, we have 4 well-equipped power racks and platforms. Strength training can be conducted in 4 groups of 3 lifters, with 2 strength coaches each supervising 2 racks, running for sessions per day. Let's say 0600, 1130, 1500, and 1630. With the A and B group concept, 96 soldiers would be involved in strength training for the 12-week period. With 4 sessions throughout the year, approximately 400 soldiers can make significant strength gains in each calendar year. After just a couple of years of implementation, it would be reasonable to think that every soldier in the group could meet the strength standards previously mentioned for the squat, deadlift, and press. Conducting the program as outlined above would still ensure that there will be plenty of time for the rest of the soldiers in the group to conduct their normal PT as prescribed by the strength coaches. After building an initial strength base in the 12-week program, soldiers will be put on a program specific to their needs. They will begin this program much stronger than before, less susceptible to injury, with improved technique and more comfortable, confident in the weight room / human optimization facility. Practical program for strength training notes that strength declines much more slowly than VO2 max. As Major Long's article also recommends, establishing a strength base first will give you the ability to tailor your conditioning to your needs at the time. Whether preparing for the APFT, at home station, or high altitude operations in Afghanistan, strong soldiers will have an advantage over weak soldiers in conducting a conditioning program designed to increase endurance. Not all units have the luxury of having their own gym and strength coaches. The good news is that the big army tends to follow the good ideas of the Special Operations Forces community. It just takes time. In the meantime, units should be given priority to use what facilities are available on post to conduct strength training. While the use of these facilities by dependents is a nice benefit of military life, their use for increasing the combat readiness of soldiers is far more important. Units should identify qualified personnel to implement the training, and they can begin making strides of their own towards having a stronger, more combat-capable force. Final word. All the mystery of combat is in the legs, and it is to the legs that we should apply ourselves. I now believe that Marshal Maurice de Saxe was talking about squatting and deadlifting. He may not have known it, but he was. Strong legs and hips are the result of a good strength training program. We must now apply ourselves to building them in our soldiers. Having now conducted a linear progression strength training program myself, I know I am better prepared to meet the challenges of combat today than I was 2 years ago. While the hazards of combat are ever present and ever changing, the key tasks which increase the survivability of our soldiers on the battlefield will remain undeniably strength-oriented. When you ask yourself the question, what is the worst thing that ever happened to me in combat? I am confident you will find this to be the case. And prescribing strength training early in a soldier's career will give him/her a persistent, useful physical capacity which will enhance future combat performance.